Heren!
The kids, and he had difficulty, and yet he was dealing with some stress around his career. I didn't have a lot of details, but he was drinking at the restaurant, and the kids were kind of, noticing, but not really sure what to make of it.
Objection calls for speculation and hearsay.
She didn't say what they said.
I'll sustain us to the last part of the answer.
Okay, please continue, but don't say what they said. Okay, the kids said.
Anyway, Johnny became upset with me for judging him. He was, it was like I couldn't win if I didn't do anything, if I didn't say anything to him about the drinking, if I didn't acknowledge it. It got worse. If I did acknowledge it, it was my fault and I was nagging. And I get it, I wouldn't like to be told what to do either, but it made him really angry, and the kids were on this press tour, and I was just concerned about them. I was concerned about them hearing us. Johnny screamed at me in the hotel room, and all I could think were the kids were in an adjoining room. What if they could hear us? I had just met them, and I didn't want them to think poorly of me and hate me, not knowing what was going on, in our behind closed doors. I remember it was name calling, and he eventually passed out.
Do you recall what names he called you? Do you recall what he said?
I heard at this time nagging bitch all the time. Called me a cunt. He even said that he made a mistake with me, and that he didn't want to, that when we touched back down, he'd get rid of me and I'd go back to, he said some disgusting things to me. I don't know if I need to repeat it.
Okay, let's go. Michelle, can you bring up Defendant's Exhibit 1090? You indicated, I think, that he passed out at the end of that. Did you take this picture?
I did.
Okay. Your Honor, I'd like to move the admission of Defendant's Exhibit 1090.
No objection, Your Honor. Thank you.
1090 in evidence. You can publish.
Thank you. And where was Mr. Depp when you took this picture?
He was passed out with his head in a table in the hotel room, in our hotel room, not the kids' hotel room, in Tokyo, on that press tour.
All right. Now I'm going to take you to August 2013. What, if any, discussions did you start having with Mr. Depp about moving in with him?
Well, after this, I was getting close to his kids, and he had a stint of sobriety shortly after that, and it felt really good again. And shortly after that, he started suggesting that I let him rent my apartment for the vultures. That's what he called the press. And he said now that we were like a known couple, now that it was out in the press, that my apartment wasn't like safe effectively for me. And I had a modest apartment in Los Angeles, and so he started saying I needed to have security on me, or we'd rent out the neighboring houses because of the vultures. And it was a conversation, and then that conversation evolved into I should move in with him. Always wanted me to go with his security guards, wanted me to have his credit card. Obviously, I wouldn't accept that, but the conversation about moving in became, hard to resist, because I was increasingly becoming a part of his life, and also loving his family, and feeling like more stability would mean more stability with him and his struggles with drug and alcohol use. And I thought I would minimize some of the jealousy and insecurity that he had. It was hard for me to justify working. Every audition, every meeting, every script I got was a negotiation or a fight. I had to justify it like as if I was saying, hey, let's have an open relationship. It was, and I thought that would be minimized if I could make him feel more secure. But, if we live together, certainly there would be more security, right? And that was my reasoning.
So you talked about still reading scripts and things. What, if anything, did you do differently in terms of pursuing your acting career?
Well, I've always been really independent, and I've never imagined not working. I've worked from the earliest time I can imagine. I come from, parents who worked until they literally couldn't anymore. I never imagined myself having to explain my job or justify my job, but I did, and I am independent, and I see myself as independent and strong-willed, and I had to bargain. Every time I'd get a script, it would be, I thought you weren't taking another job. I'd always say, are you kidding me? That's crazy. I have to work. I support my family. When I moved out to LA, I'd get a check for, a gig, $600 or something. I'd save half for me, send half to my family. I kept having to justify taking work by saying, I'm supporting my parents, I'm supporting my sister, I'm supporting my family, I have to work. And he would say, you don't have to work, kid, let me take care of you, my woman doesn't have to work. And that sounds really sweet and really romantic in some way, but it became a real fight. Every time I got a script, it was what kind of, how I was dressing, what kind of behavior I'd have, how did I have a sex scene? And then I started saying, no, I won't take the sex scenes, or, I'll take the part where I don't play, that kind of character, or then I started minimizing the kinds of kissing scenes that I had, and eventually I had to change the wardrobe that I could have in the movie. I couldn't have a sex scene, but that all, it didn't happen all at once, of course. It was little thing after little thing after little thing, and eventually I found myself pushing as many scripts off my desk as I could, picking the ones that had minimal makeup, dress as conservative as possible, finding ways to minimize the scenes I had where I had a romantic involvement of any kind. It was a constant battle and negotiation.
So let me take you back. Did you, as a result of your discussions with Mr. Depp about moving in, did there come a time that you did move in with him?
Objection leading.
Overruled.
Thank you.
Yes.
Please, and let me ask you this. You've talked about penthouse, we've heard a little bit about penthouse appointments and suites. Could you just explain to the jury the different places that Mr. Depp had in Los Angeles and what they were called, just so we have some context here when we're going through all this?
It's a little confusing, I imagine. He had about, I think, 4 or 5 mansions in this beautiful, border of Beverly Hills and West Hollywood, and they were all on a cul-de-sac, and we called it Sweetser, because that was the name of the street. And there are 5 houses, I think 5 houses, it could be 4, all, effectively, he had the whole street. Then he had about 5 penthouses downtown on the same floor of the Eastern Columbia building, which you've heard about, the ECB. And Sweetser was, Johnny's kingdom. One of those houses was like a whole house was his man cave. It was a studio, and it was where he made music and hung out. And we spent some time in there, but that was effectively Johnny's place, and then there was the downtown places, and they were effectively empty save for some furniture and one of Johnny's friends, Isaac, who you met, and he lived there at some point before Johnny and I eventually decided to move in together.
Let me just stop you there. I just want to make sure we're clear. Are we talking about the penthouses, or are we talking about the suites here?
Isaac lived in the penthouses.
Okay.
The rest of them were pretty much empty. And my best friend, who I was very, 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 very close to, went through a breakup, and he very kindly insisted on moving her into this penthouse. And of course, she said no for the first few times, but he insisted and said they were empty and he would love to have her move down there. And he very kindly moved my best friend downtown. Problem is,
Rocky?
Yeah, okay. Rocky Pennington. But the problem is it's like 30, 45 minutes from West Hollywood, where my place was, which we call Orange at the time.
Okay. So when did you move into the penthouses?
Shortly after he moved Rocky, my best friend, into the penthouse. So she was in one of these empty-ish apartments, and somewhere around that time, I think it took me some time, actually, but after that, I eventually agreed to move in with him and give up my place, although that made me pretty nervous, to be honest. But we were in this relationship that was very serious, and we were constantly traveling. Also, as another part of it, is we were in LA for a matter of days or weeks. I'd go do a job, he'd go do a job, I'd come back for a photo shoot or a red carpet, go on a location, go visit him on a location, and there was an incredible amount of travel and movement. So we weren't really, again, living the day-to-day that you might normally with a partner, where you have a home and you move in together and you have one home. We didn't have that. It was very different.
I'm going to take you to September of 2013. What were you filming at that time? London Fields?
Yes, that's right.
Okay.
I was filming London Fields. I just started.
All right. And did there come a time that you became engaged to Mr. Depp?
Well, yeah, it was difficult because in that role was a very difficult role. I mean, every time, every scene that involved sexuality or romance was like, I'd look at that on the page and it felt like I'd feel my gut tighten because I knew it was going to be an issue. But Johnny dropped me off. I gave him the script. I sent him pictures of what I was wearing in my wardrobe fittings. I sent him everything. I shared my script with his team, and the fighting eventually kind of minimized. It was clear I was going to do this job, and I told myself I had to do this job. And Johnny had to go to London, I think, for some pre-production stuff for a movie he was going to do a smaller part in. I think it was called, I think this was Into the Woods, is my best guess. So he dropped me off in London, and when he dropped me off in London, we had a few days at this hotel that we first, consummated our relationship in. It was when we were on the London press tour, and our relationship developed. That was the same hotel, and we were in this same room, which is Johnny liked to be in the same room. And it was really sweet. He got down on one knee and said, "I want you to be my girl forever, my woman, my girl. I want you to be the rest of my life. Say yes to me." He said he wanted to spend every day. He promised me that every day when I woke up, that I would wake up and he would make me smile at least once. and that would be his goal. And, you know, I looked into his eyes and I saw my future, hope, you know, like blind hope, so in love. It was one of the most, I can't describe that kind of joy, you know. I thought, you know, if we were married, then this is real. This is real. This isn't a thing of, this isn't chaotic and this will change. You know, I had so much hope in that moment. And I just said to him over and over again, are you serious? Are you real? Are you serious? Are you sure? Because he didn't have a ring, so I thought, is this an impulse thing? You know, my experience, Johnny, could be very impulsive, and he said over and over again, be my woman forever. I want you to be my wife, my wife, my wife. I of course cried, and we had a wonderful evening, and he left shortly after, and I was like, the next day I had to go to work, and I couldn't tell anyone, and I wasn't sure. Part of me was worried that he didn't mean it, or, you know, or that he wasn't sure. I just didn't want it to be an impulse thing, so I didn't want to mention it. I didn't want to bring it up. I didn't want to. And I kind of felt, I walked around for a few days like I had butterflies under my skin. And then he brought my dad out to London with my best friends, and my dad told me, you know, Johnny has asked me permission for your hand in marriage. And I felt like the luckiest woman in the world.
So while you were filming London Fields and Johnny had gone back to L.A., what, if any, issues did you have with him on fraternizing with the cast? I'm going to ask, Michelle, can you pull up Defendant's Exhibit 188, please?
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay.
Your Honor, I'm going to, let's pull up 188A. I've redacted everything but what Mr. Depp says.
All right, let me just
on
take a look
188A.
at 188A.
That's admission against interest. Do you have that? You don't have it? Give that a minute. While they're working on that, can you tell us what transpired between you and Mr. Depp when you wanted to do something with a cast member?
So, as I said, he came to London for his own work, and also he dropped me off in London, where I had to be for a few months to film this movie. And he asked me to marry him. He brought my best friends and my dad out. They left. And shortly after they left, my co-star, one of my co-stars, invited me to go to a concert with him and some of the cast to kind of break the ice, and I'd be working with them for the next few months. And I had already, you know, I already knew I couldn't be photographed, even if it was platonic. I couldn't be photographed with men or women that other people could possibly spin as romantic. I had learned that but in January, the hard way. So I asked him permission if I could go to this concert with the cast. And I said, you know, Johnny, that he's my co-star.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay.
Don't tell us what the co-star said. Just tell us what your communication was with Mr. Depp.
Objection, hearsay. Her communications are hearsay.
I'll sustain the objection.
I'm not sure I understand.
If you want to approach, that's
Yes.
That if I accepted the invitation and went out to a concert, that the engagement would be off, that the relationship would be off, and that I was foolish, naive, for thinking that people could invite me to a concert in a platonic way. I tried to say that it was fine.
Objection,
that it was-
hearsay.
She's testifying about what Mr. Depp said. I don't understand.
All right, I'll overrule that objection.
Please continue.
Yeah, he said I was foolish and naive, that no one could invite me to. How could I be so dumb to think that somebody could just invite me to a concert? Why would they want to hang out with me? Obviously, it was because they wanted more from me, and that I probably wanted more too. You know, I was basically asking for it. You're going to go backstage. What are you going to say to the band? And then I know how this plays out. And who's the other girl going to be there? And how could you be so stupid? How could you be so foolish? You're more naive. You should be smarter than this. And I apologized. I stayed, that whole evening, I think for a few hours, I spent on the phone with him, texting, calling, or talking, hanging up. He'd hang up on me, be upset, and then send me cryptic messages about my foolishness. And, you know, I'm already doing a movie where I play this, character where I was empowered. Like, I read the script and I thought this character was empowered sexually. And by the time I got Johnny's feedback on it, I had been convinced that actually I was just being used. That I was just being used. It was clear that that was all I had to offer, and I was too foolish to see it. And I had
Amber, I'm just going to stop you right there because I'd like you to take a look at Defendant's Exhibit 188A. Is that in front of you? Do you recognize this portion of the text chain between you and Mr. Depp?
Yes, I do.
Okay, and this is on September 9, 2013?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and are these statements Mr. Depp made to you during that evening that you just described to the jury?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendant's 188A.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, 188A in evidence as redacted. Do I have that redaction, or is that something you need to give me?
I think we're going to need to give it to you
Okay.
hard copy.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Your
Appreciate
Honor. And if
You can publish.
I can draw your attention to it, he first says, I don't want to make anything an issue, baby, but I literally have been on the ground just 14 fucking hours from leaving your side. Do you see that?
Yes.
And then he says, what I want, who I am, and where I want to go with us. You know very well what type of fucking man I am, and yet you lay a gauntlet before me that you know is the very species of danger that will always attract me into a very tempting test. What's behind that door? Almost impossible to even not take you on. You want me to roll the dice? This sounds more like an aggravated ultimatum than soft words that could help us make both feel better. Don't test me, please. Did he tell you that?
Yes, he
And
did.
what did you understand that to mean?
It was clear. It was a threat that if I wanted to be...
Objection, speculation.
I think she can say what she understood it to mean.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. All right. Let's move on then to the filming of Mordecai with Mr. Bettany in October, November 2013. Where did that take place?
in London.
Okay. And what, if any, involvement did you have? Were you there for any part of that filming?
For part of it, I happened to be in London already for the film I was just telling you about. And Johnny came to London shortly after to film his own movies. He did the smaller, I think it was a smaller role in Into the Woods, and then he was filming Mordecai after that. So after I finished my movie, I moved in with him into his house in London, a rented house in London.
Okay. And describe your experiences during that time period with Mr. Depp.
It was really touch and go. He was filming with Paul Bettany, and there were days when he wouldn't come home, or they couldn't get him up out of on set. He'd be asleep in his trailer, sleeping whatever he'd done the night before off. I remember he missed a few days of work that way. It struck me because in my experience in our job, you don't miss work. It doesn't matter how sick you are, you go. You know, it's millions of dollars every single day they're filming, and I had not experienced someone who could effectively just control the set like that, you know, I mean, to that extent. And one day he didn't come home, and I was worried sick. I found out that he was in a hotel room with Paul Bettany.
Objection, hearsay.
Okay. Move forward, because
When he came home, they had
Ethos heeft altijd de beste acties voor jou. Kijk nu op ethos.nl.
Nothing less than everything. Nothing less than everything. Because when the allegations were made, when the allegations were...
Did you have an argument with Mr. Depp relating to Lily Rose in November 2013?
yes.
Can you please describe that?
Well, kids were, I found them to be these beautiful, wildly intelligent little weirdos in the best way. You know, they were, I was falling in love with them. And, you know, they were in my life at that time, a short amount of time, but I loved it, and I started to feel very protective, and, you know, Johnny's sobriety meant that he was there and then he wasn't. And the nature of our lives with the travel and work meant he was there and then he wasn't. And Lily Rose, at some point, had a crush on a
Objection, hearsay, and lack of foundation.
I'll overrule for them.
Thank you. Please continue.
This argument happened because Johnny was. I didn't agree that this gentleman, it was a famous musician, over the age of 18, spent the night at the house, and I felt protective over Lily Rose and concerned. And naturally, they were not my children. It's not my place, and I understand that. I know it's a sensitive subject, so I understand why Johnny got so upset with me. But that and the introduction of the weed with his daughter, she was so young, I just felt protective. Again, it's not my place, I understand that, and I made him really angry by weighing in on that.
Okay. Did there come a time that there was a family engagement gathering?
Well, we celebrated Thanksgiving out in London. The kids were there. There was a stint of sobriety following how sick he got on set with Paul Bettany after one of his drug binges, and he kind of just came alive again. He even played a prank on me about having relapsed when he hadn't relapsed. It was. I started to kind of feel that with the kids being around. I did think that maybe this was it. We were on a good path, meaning to sobriety, that this was it, and our life was peaceful for a minute. It went back to being wonderful. There were these moments that just felt so wonderful.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
All right. I'll just sustain the objection.
Okay. Take us to the engagement. There was an engagement party, correct?
Then, yes, come Christmas of 2013, Johnny had rented this beautiful mansion in Malibu on the beach. It was gorgeous. And he brought my family out, and his family was out, obviously in LA, and we stayed in this rented mansion, and we're all together for the holidays. And one evening we were going to his mother's house. His mother, who you've heard about, was older and sick, but at home being cared for. And one evening we're going to have dinner, Christmas dinner there with her around the time of her birthday as well. And my best friend said, "You should."
Objection, hearsay.
Sorry.
Wasn't offered to prove the truth of the matter, but go ahead. Go past that. What did you do?
We went to Betty Sue's house, his mother's house, and Johnny proposed in front of our families in this big, surprise. He surprised me, got down on one knee, and I cried and hugged my mother and hugged his mother, and he gave me this enormous diamond ring, and it was a nice time.
Okay. I'm going to take you into January, February 2014. You employed a woman named Kate James, is that correct?
Objection, leading.
What, if any, relationship did you have with Kate James?
She was my assistant at the time. I hired her sometime in 2012 and had as minimal contact with her as I possibly could. So.
And why is that?
She was difficult, troubled, and inconsistent. she drank on the job and stuff like that, and her behavior was pretty
Objection relevance.
horrible.
She's already testified. Kate James has testified, and I think the bias, we can.
All right, I'll allow that. Go ahead.
Thank you. Okay. Please describe for the jury what job responsibilities Kate had and how you communicated with her and kind of how that worked.
Objection compound.
Overruled.
Thank you.
We had minimal person-to-person interaction because I was hardly ever in LA. If I was there for a few days at a time. And Johnny and I kind of lived in this insular bubble anyway when we were together. But we would send emails, texts, and a lot of voice memos, voice notes. And, you know, if I found that if I said, Kate, you know, you left the car running with your doors open and your kids in the car on the street. You
Objection
need to move
hearsay.
She's not testifying. She's testifying about context.
Sustain the objection. Next question.
All right. I'm going to ask you to take a look at Defendant's Exhibit 209.
Your Honor, I'm going to object on hearsay grounds.
All right.
We're going to lay a foundation, Your Honor.
It's still hearsay. May we
Ms. Hurd,
approach?
did you, may I lay the foundation
Go ahead.
first? Ms. Hurd, did you communicate with Kate James by email in the ordinary course of your business?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And I'm going to ask you to take a look at Defendant's 209. Is this a communication that was between you and Kate James that was in the ordinary course of business with her as an employee?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'm going to move the admission of Defendant's Exhibit 209. Business records exception.
Still hearsay, Your Honor.
Business record exception gets the business record, but it's hearsay. If there's hearsay involved inside the business record, there's still objection to hearsay.
Your Honor, the business records exception, I mean, I don't agree. I think that's the point that hearsay can.
Approach.
What, if any, communications did you have with Kate James about your issues with Mr. Depp?
Objection hearsay.
Your Honor, Ms. James has testified.
I'll sustain the objection.
All right. Well, we can take that down, Michelle. In the February, I'm going to jump to February, March 2016. What, if any, communications did you have with Mr. Depp about a prenup?
Well, after the engagement, but before the engagement party, I started to feel like it would make, I know that he earned significantly more than me. He's a successful actor. I wanted to eliminate any doubt in his mind and in other people's minds, so I brought it up to him and brought it up to my therapist.
Objection, hearsay.
She's just saying that she brought it up to her therapist. She's not saying what she said. But please focus on Mr. Depp, okay?
Of course. Johnny said he would tear it up. He said, if you ever brought one up to me, or if I ever saw one, got my hands on it, I'd tear it up. Only way out of this is death. Only way out of this is death. And I thought it would, like, I didn't care either way, but I did feel that it would eliminate suspicion or doubt, and it would make things easier. And I told him over and over again, are you sure? Are you sure? Maybe we should do this. And one time he said to me, he's like, kid, are you already thinking of how you're getting out of this? Are you already planning to get out of this, kid? You already planning on leaving? It was around the same time as the moving in together conversation. He accused me of having 1 foot out. And they kind of were happening around the same time. I still had my apartment and we're engaged now. He was asking me to redecorate Sweetser, his main house, and kind of move into the ECB building downtown where my best friend was living at this time. While the decorations and the remodeling had been done on Sweetser. And so these conversations were kind of happening about how to build our future together and how we were going to move forward together. And I would have forgotten about the extent that we had those conversations early on in the engagement if it hadn't have been for my therapist's notes.
I'm sorry, if it hadn't been for your what?
If it hadn't been for my therapist's notes, which were
Okay.
taken at the time when I was talking to her about this and my conversations with
Objection,
Johnny.
hearsay.
Okay.
I'll sustain the objection.
We'll move on. Okay. Let's take it to March 2014. Did there come a time there was an engagement party?
Yes, so it was March 2014.
Please describe for the jury.
We had an engagement party, and we decided that when we did get married, we'd have a small wedding, something intimate. But, our lives were kind of big. His life was extremely big. And we needed to incorporate, we wanted to have a bigger engagement party than a wedding, and kind of get our guests in, our family, our friends, and have a big event of it, as opposed to making the wedding something that was big. And so we kind of put it on the engagement party and had a bunch of people, a lot of friends, business acquaintances, a lot of family. I had all of my family friends and my childhood friends come out for it, and I even invited my therapist. It was a big event.
Okay. And describe what took place at the engagement party.
We walk in together and we took some pictures and said a few hellos, and then Johnny disappeared upstairs in, I guess it's like a coat room or something. It was in a big abandoned building that was rented out for events. And he had disappeared upstairs almost the entire party, I would say. It was kind of came down at the end when we were leaving, and came down once because he was at the time sharing drugs with my dad.
Objection. Speculation. Lack of foundation.
How do you know that he was sharing drugs with your dad?
I was there. I watched it.
Please continue.
My dad at the time was was addicted to the same thing Johnny was. And so my dad had, either my dad ran out or Johnny ran out. I can't recall which of the two ran out, but there was a, they needed more, of course, and had to leave the party. My dad actually left with Johnny's security to go get more drugs from
Objection
West
calls for
Hollywood.
speculation.
How do you know that?
They told me.
Hearsay.
Sustain the objection.
Okay.
And they left to go whatever, and then they came back with drugs, and everything was okay in terms of the withdrawal symptom of the, I don't know what you call it at that point, but he still stayed upstairs. And
Are you
when
referring to Mr. Depp?
yes, I am.
Okay. Please
So
continue.
shortly after that, I tried to get Johnny to come downstairs, and he just snapped at me, just verbally told me to shut the fuck up. And I remember talking to my mom about the irony of it.
Okay.
We were at an engagement party, but that was pretty much it for the engagement party. And I went downstairs and entertained guests and smiled and took pictures and put on a face and went about my evening.
All right. I'm going to take you to May 2014, the Met Gala. Could you please tell the jury what a Met Gala is and what's involved in that?
Objection compound.
Overruled.
Met Gala is a big event, annual event, celebrity event in New York. It's a fashion event, but it's just a major red carpet event. And so you have to be invited, and it's kind of a thing. And we were invited that year, and I had already gone for the previous year or two, and this year we were going to go together. And at some point in the evening, we're sitting across the table, and Johnny starts asking me about this woman. He thought I was looking at this woman in a sexual way, and I kind of turned it around on him and said that exact same
Objection hearsay.
All right.
It's context, Your Honor. This is
I'll
context.
sustain the objection.
Okay. Just say what Mr. Depp said then. I guess you can't tell us what you said to him.
Okay. He was accusing me of flirting, and that's how the argument started. I don't recall what other accusations I was fielding at that moment, but typically in my experience with him, it wasn't just one. So you'd make a point, and then he would go on to a different accusation. But I remember that what started it is this accusation that I had been flirting at this event. We get back to the hotel room, and Johnny shoves me and kind of grabs me by the collarbone area, like not really my neck, but top of my neck, above my collarbone, below my neck. I think at that point, when we were still in the living room, I shoved him back, but I don't really recall too many specifics. I remember he threw a bottle at me. It missed me, but it broke the chandelier. And at some point, I remember maybe this was the shove that I was talking about, but at some point, Johnny and I are in a struggle in the living room, and he kind of like shoves me down on the sofa, and I get up, and I'm trying to get him off of me, and it's just stronger than me. I don't know how else to describe it. And at some point, he just whacks me in the face. And I had not, at the time, been, I think that was the first time I was like, is this a broken nose? At the time, I was unsure what that feeling was, but I suspected I had a broken nose. And other than that, I was relatively unscathed. But I remember my nose being swollen, discolored, red, and I took a picture of my face at some point and made a joke about it to my friend about how bad I looked compared to how the red
Objection
carpet.
hearsay.
All right.
It wasn't offered to prove the truth of the matter,
Yes,
sir.
I'll sustain the objection.
Okay. Okay. Just don't say what you told a friend, okay? Okay. Let's take you to the Adderall Diaries. When did you start filming the Adderall Diaries?
Believe May. I filmed another movie in New York, March, April, May. I went straight from that movie to another movie, an independent film with James Franco. The one I had previously shot was with Christopher Walken. That's right. Okay, so I went from one to the other and saw Johnny in these, in between. Like if I got a long weekend or, I'd fly home to be with him and then fly back. It was kind of like that.
Fly back from where? Where were you filming those?
In New York.
Okay. And where was Mr. Depp at that time?
Johnny was in LA at the time and then eventually went on location for his movie, Black Mass, in Boston.
So you were in New York and Mr. Depp was in Boston at some point?
Eventually, by May 2014. That's it.
All right. And what, if any, discussions or arguments did you have with Mr. Depp relating to James Franco in that time frame of May 2014?
It's a nightmare. I wanted to do this independent film. I liked the story. I liked the character. I told him I'm not going to wear makeup in the thing.
Objection, hearsay.
Apparently,
Ms. Biederhoff, if you could approach, please.
so tell the jury what Mr. Depp said.
He was mad at me for taking the job with James Franco. He hated James Franco and was already accusing me of kind of secretly having a thing with him in my past since we had done Pineapple Express together.
Okay. So I'm going to take you to the Boston plane incident. We've heard about that earlier, May 24. Can you please describe for the jury what took place on May 24 relating to the plane incident?
Well, I had spoken to Johnny, he's in Boston, I'm in New York, and I spoke to him. He had already been upset with me and accused me in many arguments about not telling him about scenes that I had. If I had a kissing scene, any sort of romantic scene, and I wasn't explicit about what I was going to do, then I was accused of having withheld information and hiding it from him. So I didn't want the fight, of course. I didn't want the argument. but I had to kind of eggshell tiptoe around how to tell him when I had any sort of scene like that. And I did tell him in this occasion.
Objection, hearsay.
We need to stay with what Mr. Depp said, okay?
Okay, so he was upset with me, but he didn't sound coherent so much on the phone. He was yelling at me about how could you tell me this? How could you tell me this when I'm filming, when I have this scene that I'm doing? How could you tell me this when I'm working? Obviously, I couldn't tell him any other time because we were both filming, and I told him as soon as it was relevant, but he kept saying, how could you tell me this? How could you just tell me this? And it was like I had told him I was having an affair or something, you know, it was that angry at me. But he kind of started to sound less connected to reality as these like arguments would happen on the phone. This is in one day. Eventually, he hangs up on me in the conversation, screaming at me. I talked to his assistants. I won't say what they said, but I had conversations and felt encouraged that I could continue on with the plan, which was for me to get on the plane, go to Boston, pick him up, and we would go back to LA for his daughter's birthday. I was nervous because the conversation I had had with him, and he was so upset with me on that conversation, but I figured I assumed he had passed out and that he would have been kind of sobered up the next day, assuming that the work would mean that he felt pressured to kind of pull it together. And I get on the plane. He sent the plane, so I assumed he's not that mad at me. He's over it. We're moving on. He's sobered up. There had been a lot of talk about a sober plan, like a full detox, a full recovery, a doctor, a whole plan. You know, there were talks of that following what had happened in London. So I was feeling like, okay, well, maybe we're here. And I get on the plane. It touches down and the SUV pulls up and it sits on the tarmac for a very long time. He knows I'm on the plane waiting for him. So I kind of started to anticipate that things weren't as I hoped, meaning that he was sober and had slept it off. And I'm sitting on the plane for a very long time waiting for him, and he finally opens the door, and I see him get out of the SUV, and I can guess by how he's moving, how he's walking. I didn't realize at the time I had already become really sensitive to these little changes because my life changed depending on what he was on. And he gets on the plane, and I just knew in every cell of my body something was wrong. And he comes straight up to me, doesn't say anything to me, but is looking at me. He's got these glasses on, and he takes them off in this kind of aggressive manner and sits down across from me, not in the usual spot. We kind of have our places on his plane, you know, where you get used to sitting. And I remember I got up and moved to accommodate him getting by so he could sit in the normal seat as per usual. He didn't. He sat across from me. At some point, and I don't really remember the exact sequence of it, we take off, and at some point he's asking me what's wrong with me, what do I have? Do I have something to tell him? Do I have something to tell him? You want to talk to me about your day yesterday? And then it gets, I already know that he's drunk. I already know he's using, he reeks of weed and alcohol. I mean, his breath smelled so bad, and I could anticipate that there was a no-win situation here. There was no me talking myself out of this or talking him down or any, you know, a lot of my arguments and my involvement in them are me trying to diffuse by explaining or
Objection, non-responsive.
She's telling the story, Your Honor.
I'll sustain an objection as part. Good. Okay.
So he is asking me questions, and I know to not engage. I was polite. I made sure to answer minimal amount of, the minimal amount that I could. I moved slowly. I was trying to be polite, but not engage because there was no win. And he kept going, kept asking me. Eventually he went from, do you have something to tell me, to, you want to tell me how much you liked it? Tell me, did he slip a tongue? It got worse and worse, just more. It went from asking me about how my kissing scene went or how the sex scene went to asking me what James Franco had done in the scene, to being really explicit about my body. He was talking about he was saying really disgusting things about my body, about how I liked it, how I responded, and then he started just straight up taunting me. I know you liked it. He called me a go-getter. He called me a slut. And also, this is happening with security and his assistants on the plane. And I remember I felt I struggle to be able to tell you how embarrassed I was, because he was speaking to me in front of people in this way, asking me if I liked it and if I was wet, and why I wasn't looking at him, and that was proof. I wasn't looking at him. That was proof that I was asking for it. Did I ask James to do this and this to me? And how about if he does those things to me? Insert sexually explicit descriptions of what he accused me of wanting or deserving. And I, at some point in this, get up and move to the front of the plane. And I remember getting up so slowly. I didn't want to aggravate him. I didn't want to give him any excuse to pounce on. I didn't want to upset him. I didn't want him to flip a switch and get worse. I just remember very slow movements, and I slowly get up and move to the front of the plane, and he starts throwing things at me. Ice cubes, utensils. He's calling me a go-getter, and then an embarrassment, talking about what an embarrassment I am. I don't know how many times I moved seats. I wish I did. I remember moving more than once, and Johnny came to me each time, not the other way around. He sits down in front of me at one point, and because I'm not answering him, I was looking out of the window, and he slaps my face. And his friend is in our proximity. And it didn't hurt my face. It just felt embarrassed that he would do that to me in front of people. It was the first time that anything like that had happened in front of somebody. I got up to move again, and he's just taunting me, having a laugh, screaming, and then just straight up mean, calling me names. And it was oscillating between those things. And I get up slowly again, and I just resolve to just sit the rest of the time up at the front of the plane. And as I get up, he kind of kicks the swivel chair into my hip, or kind of just hits me. And I look at him, and he asks me, what are you going to do about it? I just stared at him. I just stared at him and wanted him to see me. I wanted to get through to him. Didn't feel there was it felt like there was a blackness in his eyes. I wanted to look at him. I wanted him to see me. It didn't even feel like him. And as I'm walking away, slowly, trying not to be, I was being very deliberate about my movements, wasn't saying anything, I wasn't engaging. I am walking away from him slowly, and he tells me to hurry the fuck up. Hurry up. And I just look at him one more time, wanting to penetrate the monster to see the man that I love underneath that. The man I loved. And he tells me to hurry up again. And I pull my gaze away from him. I walk away from him. My back is turned to him, and I feel this boot in my back. He just kicked me in the back. I fell to the floor. I caught myself on the floor, and I just felt like I was looking at the floor of the plane felt like a long time. And I thought to myself, I don't know what to do. I can't believe he just kicked me. No one said anything. No one did anything. It was like you could hear a pin drop on that plane. You could feel the tension, but no one did anything. And I just remember feeling so embarrassed. I felt so embarrassed that he could kick me to the ground in front of people. And more embarrassing, I didn't know what to do about it. I got up and I walked to the front of the plane. I sat down and I just looked out of the window. And Jerry Judge's security and my friend both kind of under their breath asked me, "Are you okay?"
Objection, hearsay.
I spent the rest of the time looking out of the window.
Sustain the objection.
And
Did there come a time that you tape recorded Mr. Depp on this plane?
I want to sit here and say that I was telling myself I needed to leave him, but as he got worse, he demanded the oxygen tank from the flight attendant, excuse me, and he continued to drink, and then eventually started howling like an animal and passed out in the bathroom with the door locked, and was howling. And I at some point pushed record on my phone because there was that 5% part of me.
Objection, non-responsive.
I don't think it's non-responsive. She's explaining what led up to her tape recording him and why. I mean, I can ask her, will that solve it?
All right.
Why did you tape record him?
Because I knew that Johnny wouldn't remember what he had done. I knew he would not remember. And if
Calls for speculation.
She can say why she did it and what she thought.
But that last part called for speculation. I'll sustain the
Don't
objection.
say I knew. Why did you tape record?
in my experience, when Johnny was that inebriated, he would not remember what he had done.
Calls for speculation.
How can that call for speculation?
I'll sustain the objection.
All right, let's go to defendants 221. And I'm going to play 3 different parts for it.
Your Honor,
And if
may
you
we
can-
approach, please?
Okay.